It's recap time. Welcome to the Rush Recap. Today I'll be explaining an action thriller movie called Taken, released in 2008. The action-packed thriller begins with the introduction of Bryan Mills. A former CIA agent is looking over a photo album of her daughter Kim. It is revealed that Bryan has separated from his wife, and Kim resides with her mother, Lenore, and his stepfather, Stuart. The scene shifts to a birthday party sequence, where Bryan brings a karaoke set for her daughter. Kim is delighted to receive the present, while his stepfather one-ups Bryan by giving her an expensive horse. This makes him look inferior to her stepfather, as he makes peace with his small gift. Later at night, Bryan gets together with his old friends and cooks a barbecue dinner. One of his friends hooks him up with a security assistant deal. Bryan gets to be in charge of a pop star concert and handles the smooth functioning of the event. When the pop star glances at Bryan, he tries to inquire about the details of becoming a singer. He attempts to get the information and help her daughter, Kim, fulfill her dream of becoming a singer. The pop star doesn't pay much attention, and Bryan's request is ignored. Later on, things go completely south at the concert, and a fight breaks out. One of the attackers pulls out a knife and tries to hurt the pop star. However, Bryan intervenes and uses his sharp fighting skills to save the pop star. He manhandles the knife guy and disables him right on the spot. When things become normal, the pop star apologizes to Bryan for his conduct, and she gives him her number to help her daughter with the singing opportunity. Later on, Bryan is invited to lunch with Kim and Lenore. It is then that he gets to know about Kim's plan to attend a concert in Europe. Since Kim is 17 years old, she requires her father's permission to travel overseas and explore the world. Bryan disapproves of international travel and cites security reasons for his disagreement. Kim is disappointed by Bryan and leaves the lunch midway. Meanwhile, Lenore tries to change Bryan's mind about the situation. As expected, Bryan agrees and signs the paper. He also gets to know that Kim has lied to them, as she's going to travel differently than the planned route. This new information leaves him even more worried for her safety. During the trip, Kim and her friend Amanda meet with Peter, a stranger. When they check into their rooms, Bryan tries to call Kim multiple times, but she doesn't answer her phone. A panicked Bryan tries to call her again, and finally, Kim picks up the cell. Things change drastically when Kim notices Amanda getting abducted from her room's window. This leaves her startled as she relays the information to Bryan. Bryan tells Kim to hide under the bed and shout out the description of the kidnappers. He also suggests keeping the phone on. Soon enough, the kidnappers get a hold of Kim and drag her from inside the bed. The call remains connected, and Bryan threatens the abductors. He tells them that if they leave her daughter, he will do nothing. But if they kidnap her, he will find them and eliminate them. The voice on the other end of the phone call wishes him good luck. A disgruntled Bryan leaves his room and storms into Stuart's house. He mentions that Kim has been abducted and that he needs an emergency jet to travel to Paris. He also connects with Sam, his friend, to get some background information about the bad guys. Sam informs Bryan that the kidnappers are part of a trafficking ring controlled by a man named Marco. Bryan is also made aware of the looming threat of the kidnappers. Sam states that Kim must be found within the parameters of 96 hours, or it will be impossible to locate her after that. Bryan leaves for Paris immediately and finds Kim's apartment. At first, he breaks into the place and looks for further clues. Bryan uses his special training to recreate the events of the kidnapping and locate Kim's broken phone. He takes out the memory card and looks at the pictures inside it. This is when Bryan gets to know about Peter, as he sees his reflection in the photographs. Bryan locates Peter at the airport and pushes him into a cab. He starts to punch Peter and break his arm while getting some answers from him. When Bryan is distracted, Peter escapes from the car and jumps from a bridge. Bryan tries to run after him, but an oncoming truck hits Peter on the spot, and he is killed. Thereby, it makes it even more difficult for Bryan to locate the kidnappers. Bryan takes help from his former contact, Jean-Claude, who works for the French intelligence. He informs Bryan about the kidnapping syndicate and advises him to remain under the radar. During the night, Bryan hires a local translator and plants a bug on one of the bad guys. He deduces the location of another kidnapping ring with the help of the translator. As expected, Bryan storms into the place and finds multiple helpless women. One of them is found wearing Kim's jacket. A high-profile action scene ensues, and Bryan decides to save the lady. He gets into a gunfight with the bad guys and sets the whole place on fire. The bad guys come at Bryan with their ammunition, but he overpowers them with his skills and tactics. Later on, Bryan nurses the unconscious lady and helps her recover from the entire incident. The next day, Jean-Claude warns Bryan that he must leave the city. The The French agent plans an elaborate strategy to find Brian by tracking his cell phone. However, when the cops close in on Brian, they find two cell phones placed in front of each other. In this manner, the former CIA agent outsmarts them. When Brian reaches the safe location, he interrogates the woman about the whereabouts of Kim's jacket. The new information leads Brian into a den of criminals. He uses the identity of Jean-Claude to penetrate the building and disguise himself as the intelligence head. Soon enough, Brian recognizes the voice on the phone and pins down Marco. A fight takes place between Brian and the rest of the gang. The former CIA agent dismantles the crooks one by one and eliminates the bad guys, except Marco. Later on, Brian finds the unconscious girls in the den of the criminals, along with Kim's friend Amanda. This makes him even more agitated, and he uses torture techniques to expel the truth out of Marco. He uses shock treatment to locate the whereabouts of his daughter, Kim. At last, Brian gets to know about the guy who is responsible for Kim's abduction. He leaves Marco on the chair with continuous electric shocks. Brian then makes his way towards Jean-Claude's home to find the location of the final criminal. This prompts him to confront Jean-Claude about his corruption cases in front of his wife. The intelligence officer pulls the gun on him and threatens to shoot him. To escape the scene, Brian shoots his wife, but not in a lethal manner. He then gets the complete details about the last criminal and leaves the scene after knocking Jean-Claude unconscious. Later on, Brian reaches a party under the disguise of an intelligence officer to nail down the final criminal. He meets with a security person who informs him that he is looking for a St. Clair. The security person refused to give out the details to Brian as his name wasn't mentioned in the list. The former CIA agent knocks the security person down inside a lift and protects his identity. Brian then uses a waiter's disguise to locate the room of bidding. This is where her daughter Kim is present, along with the rest of the bidders. He takes one of the filthy bidders on a gunpoint and forces him to place the bid on Kim in order to set her free. At last, he gets the momentum on his side as he walks out of the room. However, the situation takes a complete U-turn when someone hits Brian on the head. Brian wakes up around a bunch of bad guys with his hands tied from above. The final criminal, St. Clair, takes notice of Brian and his actions. He then orders the rest of the bad guys to eliminate Brian once and for all. When St. Clair leaves the room, Brian uses the pole above his head to break free from the bad guys. He attacks them with every move possible and overpowers all of them. Soon enough, when he is done getting rid of the bad guys, he goes to St. Clair. During his last confrontation with Claire, he reveals to Brian that his daughter has been taken on a yacht. Brian shoots Claire repeatedly upon learning this information and goes out to find his daughter. At first, Brian jumps from a bridge over the top to enter the yacht. He then gets rid of the first two henchmen in close combat. After this, he goes further inside the yacht, gets into a fight with another strong henchman, and overpowers him to move forward. At last, Brian opens the final door and finds a guy holding Kim by the knife point. He threatens to kill Kim if he steps any further. He also tries to negotiate with the revenge-filled father, who points a gun directly at him. In this heated moment, Brian maintains his cool and takes a headshot at the old guy. He is able to successfully eliminate him and save his daughter. Kim reunites with his dad, and both of them get emotional. In the last few scenes, Brian and Kim return home and reunite with their family. Brian also takes Kim back to the same pop star, who promised to help Kim with her singing. The film ends here. I hope you liked this movie recap. Please comment down on what you liked about this movie and what scene you liked, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.